Everybody has a story with Jeff Seltzer. Everybody has a story with Jeff Seltzer. Everybody has a story with Jeff Seltzer. Everybody has a story with Jeff Seltzer.
Hello and welcome to Everybody Has a Story with Jeff Seltzer. You may notice I'm not your normal host, Jeff Seltzer. I am Daniel Allen, and I'm super excited to be here for a very special episode. Today we're celebrating Jeff's 1-year anniversary of the podcast. So it's great to see everyone. Hopefully everyone already found the podcast, but just as a reminder, we are available on every major podcast platform. We're also available on video on Spotify and YouTube. So you can find us on Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, Amazon, Pandora, and everywhere else you can find a podcast. If there's somewhere that someone says they can't find it, please let us know and we'll make sure to get it added. Also, just a reminder, you want to get in touch with the pod, there's multiple ways to do that. Firstly, you can get in touch with us on Instagram at Everybody Has a Story Pod. You can get us on TikTok also at Everybody Has a Story Pod. YouTube, the same, at Everybody Has a Story Pod. And Jeff's personal Insta is at Seltzer77. You can also reach out directly via email, everybodyhasastorypod@gmail.com. You can reach out for everything Jeff Seltzer at jeffseltzer.com. And also the page for the site, for the podcast in general, is everybodyhasastorypod.com. So lots of ways to continue to get involved. So as I said, we're here for a super exciting episode this year. Just over a year ago, a year exactly to the day, 7/17, was the day that Jeff started the podcast. So I'm super excited to welcome a guest today, Jeff Seltzer.
Hello, Daniel. How are you today?
Hey, Jeff. How's it going? Welcome to your podcast.
Thank you. So first of all, really well done. Really impressive. Definitely think that, when I'm sick or out of town, you could definitely cover off for me. So I appreciate that.
You definitely have plenty of ways to get to your audience. That's one thing I will say. I don't think you've missed anything. So anyway, first of all, massive congratulations. Like a year in podcast world is pretty impressive. So before we jump into hearing a bit about your reason for doing the podcast, some of your favorite bits, obviously your favorite guest, which the correct answer is me. We've got some interesting stats we wanted just to start for you and the listeners. So if I was to tell you that over 500 million people worldwide listen to podcasts, you've got a massive target audience to go after, Jeff. So keep working on that.
Thank you.
But what's super exciting is that 160 million of them are in the US. So I didn't do the math, but I think you've got a percentage of that already. So good work so far. A year in, but keep building.
I appreciate that. Definitely, as we say in the business world, lots of opportunity, lots of white space. So definitely we'll continue to keep going and keep digging here.
Yeah. The other thing that's super exciting for you is this industry is projected to be worth almost 18 billion by 2030. So there's a really good retirement plan in here for you as well.
Awesome.
Massive opportunity for an unlock there. And I know you're still looking for some sponsors. So if anyone is out there and wants to sponsor the pod, this pod is now a year in. Really good opportunity to reach out to Jeff on one of the previously shared opportunities.
Or if anybody wants to buy this podcast, you don't necessarily get me with it, but you can get the name, the branding. You can get the dozens and dozens of followers. Hit us up via email at everybodystorypod@gmail.com, and we'll talk.
And I'm open to coming with the podcast if it gets purchased, just so what's also the last couple of stats, and then I want to turn over to hear from you. But did you know that this is really exciting? So we're at episode 49 today. As I said, a year in.
Yes.
The average podcast doesn't get past episode 3.
That's crazy.
That is just crazy. So you think where we are, that's super exciting. And another 90% on top of that quit before getting to 20. So the fact that you are already where you are is super impressive. And also, even podcasts that do tend to get past that, they only last for 174 days. So you're already double that already. So I think it's a round of applause for the pod, for the work you've done, and also for all the listeners continuing to come every week, because without those listeners and those guests, the pod wouldn't be here. So
absolutely.
So before I jump into something, is there anything else you wanted to say? Seeing as this is your pod after all, that I've just hijacked. Anything else you want to say before we jump into my interview for you?
No, absolutely. This is going to be a fun conversation. We talked about it a few months ago, trying to figure out a way to make the 1-year anniversary special and different. It seemed like the best way to do it was to put me on the spot as the guest and bring you in as the host. So really excited for this. Additionally, as you had said, obviously I appreciate everybody who listens or has anything to do with the show. So from all of the people who have, been here since day one, shout out to Gina, it was her idea to initially start this podcast. Shout out to the Major World Order, who had me on as a guest about a year and a half ago, which gave me the confidence to do this. All the listeners, anybody I've ever engaged with via social media, reached out, all of my guests, obviously, Daniel for doing this today, Marcus, who is in second place right now in terms of the most times on the podcast. So shout out to my buddy, Marcus, pal of the show, buddy of the show, whatever else like that. And lastly, shout out to Beth, the fact that she puts up with my nonsense and that oftentimes I'll block the calendar and say, hey, I'm not available because I'm recording a podcast. So there's that, and probably the few times I woke up Allison, who's sleeping in the next room sometimes while recording late at night. So obviously huge gratitude, huge excitement, but happy to see the way it's gone so far, and excited to see where it goes going forward.
Awesome. Couldn't agree more. 110% agree that Marcus is probably your second best guest. So we'll
say that for you, please.
That there. Okay, so first things first, if we look back to 7/17 last year and we had Dana's episode, can you please name every other episode in order, please?
Every episode in order. So I can't do it in order. I could definitely go through most of them, as most of them have probably kept me up at night at some point for various reasons. But, again, the first few, to be honest, I would say the first few were the most challenging to me, I'd say, in the fact that I didn't necessarily know what I was doing. Not that I know what I'm doing now, but a lot less then, right? Because I had very little experience in podcasting to the point, right? I was a guest somewhere on the Major World Order podcast. And then I did some research, talked to some people, and decided, hey, I'll give myself about a year and a half to start a podcast. I went to Japan, came home, and within a week, I started a podcast. So, going back to episode 1 with Dana on celebrity autographs, I will say a year in, it is my number 1 most streamed episode of all time. I think it's interesting. I definitely, it's one that doesn't surprise me it did so well. Number 1, because everybody likes to start with a pilot episode, right? Whether it be a TV show, whether it be the first of a movie series, whatever else like that. Secondly, I think of all of the topics that I've covered on this show so far, celebrity autographs is one that's very interesting and intriguing, which is largely why I'd reached out to Dana when I was going to start the podcast. I was like, I thought he'd be a great guest, interesting stories and such. And then coincidentally, him and his buddy Sean started a podcast literally the same week. Shout out to Mark.radio. They celebrated their 1-year anniversary. I think it was this week or last week as well. They have more episodes than me, as it's a team of 2, and they haven't taken any time off versus me. I think I took off the month of December and the month of April. So I've taken a little more time off. I don't believe either of them have any kids. They do have jobs, obviously, but different responsibilities in life. So we all make the most of it however we can. Plus, for them, it's part of their larger marked out collectibles business, versus for me, this is more of a passion project or a hobby.
Yeah, so just, one of the stats that I was sharing is that the average person listens to 8.5 podcasts a week. So you do have an opportunity to up your output a little bit.
Yeah.
So, if you can find some time, maybe get it up a little bit and give those listeners an opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I'll see what I can do. If I can maybe set up a podcast set in my car. I do have a 2-hour round trip commute nowadays, so I could probably record a podcast of going to and coming home from work. So maybe that's at least a half a dozen episodes I can record a week. Plus, during lunch, I'm sure I can make this work.
That's perfect. Awesome. So you talked a little bit about some of the inspirations you got with the Major World podcast, etc. So, as a layman sitting here, how do you actually set up a podcast? Jeff gets the idea, I want to do a podcast. What do you do?
Sure. So great question. So once I decided, okay, Jeff Seltzer is going to do a podcast or create a podcast, or if I was Daniel Ireland, Marcus Brandon, or whatever my name might be, what would I do? So first thing, there's a couple of parts to it. There's a technological part to it, and then there's obviously the content part to it. So what I'll say is this: I kind of did both in parallel. From a technological part, I reached out to the guys on the Major World Order podcast, and I was like, hey guys, so obviously you do a podcast because they've been doing one for years at that time. How does it literally work? How do I literally make one? Do I take on my iPhone, put on the video app and just start recording? What do I do? So in speaking to a few of them, so in talking to Billy and talking to Husvar, they had give me some good suggestions. So first they had said, okay, get yourself a good microphone. So first thing I did is I went to Best Buy and bought myself a decent microphone, probably $130 or so. It's a Blue Yeti microphone, works pretty well. Additionally, a pair of headphones that plug in. I was told don't use wireless headphones because with the latency or the lag, sometimes that could be a little wonky. So I got that. And then I said, okay, so from a actual software perspective, what does that look like? So they use the same software that the Major Wrestling Figure podcast uses. A lot of podcasts use it also, called StreamYard. It's currently, I think they raised the price recently. I think it's about $800 a year or so. But this is legitimately on the computer how I record it. So I can have up to, I think, 10 guests at a time. I can put music in there, upload, and things like that. Okay, so within that, I can record. Basically records a video file, and you can create it as an audio file as well. If people are still listening, thank you for listening. Let's continue now. So then what I do is once I have the video file, you want to create an account on Spotify for podcasters, like Spotify creators. What I did then was I upload the episode every week, and then I also open an account at Apple Music or Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Pandora, etc. And what they do is they basically syndicate or pull the podcast from Spotify. So Spotify is the host, and then it goes elsewhere. And then I can schedule it so I can have it go live immediately. I can have it go live whenever. Like I've had times where I recorded like 4 episodes in a week, take the next month off, and I've scheduled all 4 at the same time. So basically I can disappear and it's all good. So that's kind of like the technological part. There's obviously the part of, okay, what do I want to make a podcast about? So when I was in Japan about a year ago, I opened up OneNote on my phone. It's Microsoft software. It's basically like a digital notepad of sorts, and just made a list. What would I talk about? Who could I talk to? Just kind of different ideas. Went through that, and then I figured out like what I want to do, what I could do. Reached out to some people, and scheduled recording, because then through the software I can send a link to people. And then lastly, like after each podcast is over, a lot of it is uploading it to Spotify, like I said, uploading it to YouTube. I decided to create an IMDb profile page, which I think, from a marketing perspective, I think is pretty cool in the fact that it gives credibility to the show. Like I had one person just do a Google search for my show, and because they saw that I had an IMDb page, like it gave it credibility. They're like, this is official, this seems real. Additionally, after each episode drops, I generally post to the Instagram page that I created for the show and other places. And then various episodes, I'll text random people that are interested or relevant to them to try to get word of mouth out there. Because again, without having like a big organization or a big company behind me, this is a one-man show. So it's only going to go as far as I can from an advertising perspective, so that's where we are.
Yeah. Let's be clear, it's a 2-man show today, so we're good.
It is a 2-man show. Yes, absolutely. Executive producer Daniel Ireland, and obviously one time as of right now, podcast host Daniel Ireland.
And for anyone out there, this is a voluntary gig. Awesome. So you talked a lot about doing it. That's super helpful, because I think for anyone, it's kind of might sound like a cool idea, but there's a lot behind the scenes. What would you say has been the biggest challenge? 49 episodes in, what has been the toughest challenge?
Sure. And before answering a question, what I'll say too is, as I've mentioned in the past, if anybody ever has any interest in starting a podcast, wants to start like a share group, whatever else like that, or whatever, feel free to reach out to me. Daniel shared the socials earlier. We'll share them again at the end of the show. But for me, I try to be a very giving person. So if anybody wants help or wants mentorship or whatever, reach out. I'm super happy to help. To your question about what the biggest challenges have been. So what I'll say is this. This happened. The first one happened a lot in the first, let's say, 25 episodes or so. And it doesn't involve cursing. We only had one curse that came over the air, I think, once back at the PWJ live show.
You still one of my questions for later.
Oh, okay. Well, then we can edit this out. And we could do it again. So what I will say is this. Obviously, as this is being done over the internet, the quality of the video and the audio will only be as good as the internet's going to be. So at my house, I do have the highest quality and highest speed Verizon Fios Wi-Fi available. What I'll say is not all of my guests necessarily had the greatest of Wi-Fis. I had a couple of guests early on where the internet or the Wi-Fi in their end dropped out fairly early or was inconsistent. So there's a lot of hiccuping. There's a lot of me trying to kind of like talk over it as they weren't there, figuring out how to make the most of it. I think once or twice I had to start again because their Wi-Fi dropped out. But for the most part, I'd say since like last November, it hasn't happened, knock on wood, which means it'll probably happen pretty soon. But yeah, so that's probably the biggest issue, because obviously the content is only going to be as good as the quality of the content. The other piece is scheduling of guests. So I mentioned earlier, like Dana and Sean have Marked Out Collectibles, they have Marked Out Radio podcast. For them, it's a 2-man show, and they barely ever have guests on. So for the most part, it's 2 friends or 2 coworkers who schedule a podcast every week. And it's easy, right? They're dependable. They both have a vested interest. Challenge that I've had is trying to make sure that I'm not using the same guest all the time, and at the same time getting fresh and new guests and new content, which becomes challenging, right? Because at the end of the day, like I only have a network of so much, and I only have so many people who are willing to be on a podcast, right? Like I have people of interesting stories. Like I'll take this. My sister is a teacher. I would love to get a teacher's perspective of how teaching is, schooling, all that kind of stuff on a podcast. But there were a lot of people who either, for whatever reason, just have no interest in being a podcast. No issue with that at all. Totally get it. It's their prerogative. It's just the way that they are. Or some people are a little more protective because they don't their job won't let them do it. Like there were 2 people that I'm friends with that I worked with my first job out of college, and I was like, hey, I would love to have a podcast talking about first jobs out of college. Both of them had zero interest. I think one of them, it was along the lines of their job won't let them. The other one was like, nah, podcasts aren't for me. So trying to find people who A, have an interesting story, and B, are comfortable recording their voice and on a podcast. It's a very small Venn diagram. of people that are in that overlap. So that's kind of the challenge. Additionally, sometimes I've had guests that I'd scheduled and were good to go, and last minute had to cancel for whatever reason. Understanding life gets in the way, totally get it. There were a couple of funny ones, which I'm not going to mention on the air, but for ironic reasons, they just didn't work. I had another one where somebody was scheduled, and I even like previously had started like advertising or talking about it in previous episodes. And then like a day or two before, the person was like, oh, I might actually be flying while we're supposed to record it. And I was like, you know what? Never mind. Let's reach out later on and see if we can schedule it. Will that ever happen? I don't know. But at the end of the day, like, I try to keep it open. At the same time, obviously working to find a replacement. So that was back in May. And that was when Marcus was a quick sub, which Marcus was amazing. So definitely some challenges, but at the end of the day, I mean, that's makes it interesting sometimes. And sometimes, when someone drops off, someone even better comes in. So that's what we do.
Love it. And personally, from my normal role as a avid listener, listen to every episode of this podcast, I do have to say you've had some fantastic guests, some great repeat guests. I think that you've done a really nice job of balancing stories. Like, I think if anyone was to listen to every episode, I think they'll find at least something that interests them. So I think back to like flying a plane, like there's so many like random topics that people would never normally encounter day to day. So I think you've done a really nice job of bringing some really interesting topics to the listeners. So I think you should be proud of that. And I know a lot of work goes into that. So definitely something you should be proud of.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And a lot of what I was trying to do when I started this podcast was to think through like, okay, I mean, from a communications perspective, wanted to kind of evolve my communication style. So I've always had kind of like a moderator or like a host kind of personality. I think I've been able to do a much better job based on my last year of experience of figuring out how to make small talk. Right. Like small talk doesn't come easy to a lot of people. And for me personally, it doesn't either. But I've been able to figure out ways to kind of like keep conversations going and kind of like pull things out of people, which has been really, really good. Additionally, to your point from before, in terms of, various guests and various topics, another idea behind the podcast was see how much I can learn. Right. So selfishly, a lot of the times is like I see somebody who has like a certain interest or a certain job or a certain hobby. And I'm like, hey, what can I personally learn about it? Right. So maybe there's a story I can share with my audience that like they don't know. So going back to one of the earlier episodes, and again, this got put together by a friend of the show, buddy of the show, pal of the show, Jamie Romano, when she hooked me up with her sister and her sister-in-law to learn about DIY projects. As I've said multiple times in the show, like DIY does not come to me. Like I'm more like PIY, I guess, pay it yourself. I'll just throw money at people and say, just take care of this. So hearing another perspective of somebody or some people who absolutely love it and enjoy it, like that's their hobby. Like for me, it's intriguing. It's like, for me, I like hearing different perspectives. And I like understanding where they come from. Not to get into politics, but like there are people that I talk to who, assuming that they're, in a good place or in a, coming from a good faith perspective, I like to hear their perspectives in terms of like why they think certain things. Like, is it a case of, hey, they follow this just blindly because, or do they really believe it and they believe it because of reasons X, Y, and Z? So I'm always trying to keep my perspective open. And I mean, anybody that I'm friends with that I talk to will tell you, like for me, I am very open and willing to change my perspective, my opinion on things as new data comes in. Updated data is a good reason to say, well, I thought X, now I think Y, because we didn't know X before. We didn't know Y before. Now that we know X and Y, this makes sense,
Yeah, and I think that's an important part. Like you talk about the stars of the show, like the guests. Obviously, you're the star, but the guests are the star. And I think having been a guest a few times now, more times than Mark, I think what I would say is that like anyone out there that's interested, definitely reach out to Jeff because Jeff makes it super comfortable. It's a lot of fun. Like it feels intimidating, like I'm going to be on a podcast, like you, Jeff, and you'd never done it before to set it up. It's also if you've never been on one as a guest. But I think the whole experience is great. It's a lot of fun. It's really, you make it really easy for the guests, definitely from my experience. So if anyone out there is interested, again, we'll share the socials at the end again. Definitely reach out to Jeff. There's a great opportunity to come on here and share a really exciting story.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, again, anybody who wants to be a guest, DM me on Instagram at Everybody is a Story Pod. We are looking for guests for the future, probably taking the month of August or most of August off. But with that said, again, always looking for new experiences, new guests, new topics, new stories. And also, as Daniel said, like thinking about it could seem intimidating, but like I try to make this as safe an environment as possible. Like I try to make the guests feel comfortable. I do try to make sure that if possible, I pre-interview the person so that way we can kind of align on some ideas, some topics, and kind of get a free-flowing conversation going from there. And this podcast, as Daniel will tell you, it's not about gotchas or about getting people in trouble or kind of like, trying to point something out. It really is just legitimately me trying to learn, me asking questions, and the person can share as much or as little as they want to. And if you own a business, it's a great way to kind of throw out some plugs too if you want.
Great. Well said. Okay, so keeping on the lines of guests, like just like you talked about like learning about different topics. I would just like to know, have you learned anything about yourself from a guest? Like, has there been something that you were chatting to a guest about, and you're like, wow, I didn't remember that, or really just something a little bit that triggered that you maybe kind of forgotten about?
It's a great question. So things that I've learned. So learn about myself or learn about the guests?
Either or. I think about yourself. Like, was there something maybe through like a guest you maybe hadn't connected for a while, but you suddenly realized you had a common connection you never realized you had, or something like just that triggered that was a little bit of a surprise, even a surprise, like as you were going through the conversation, was there a surprise that sort of triggered as you were interviewing someone?
So it's a good question. What I'll say is this, like Megan Fernandez, who I've had on the show 3 times now, we talked about Disney Vacation Club, we talked about Not So Scary Halloween and Epic Universe. She's somebody who I've had on 3 times, and I very much enjoyed talking to her. I think she comes across very well. She's very well spoken. She's done a lot of stuff on social media herself as well. So shout out to Megan. For me, especially as a Disney dork, like I am trying to learn as much as I can every single time. So some of the Disney hacks or things that like, you know, I thought I knew everything, but I don't, because she shared something is great. What I'll say is this too. So like in our Epic Universe conversation, I went to Epic Universe at Universal Studios, Florida a week before she did. So Allison and I went, we saw some things, did some things. Obviously we had different experiences because she went with her whole family. I just took Allison. There were a couple of things at Epic Universe that I just didn't realize were there or didn't find when I was there that she mentioned that I was like, wow, that sounds amazing. Like when I go back in September, I'd like to check that out. So that was pretty cool. There were probably others as well, like in terms of like in talking to Amit back in, I think it was October, learning about like how to get like a pilot's license. Yeah. Now, as everybody probably knows at this point, like I get severe motion sickness, so it's probably not something that's in my near future, but just understanding the process of like, how does it literally happen, right? So you go to the airplane school or pilot school, you take some written tests, take some classes, and then like very quickly you do a couple of hands-ons with an instructor, but not long after that, like you're up in the air by yourself, which to me is just intriguing. In fact, that like, you know, you're getting into an airplane, you're flying above in what I would call, you know, a very risky situation, and there's nobody else out there. So things happen, but the system works, and that's how it's set up. So, you know.
Love that. Yeah. And Megan's fantastic. I'm not going to say I have a favorite podcast guest, but if I was, she's definitely up there. Super great to listen to, super insightful. And even as I'm not a massive Disney fan, not on the same level as you, just a really entertaining guest. So, other question really around some of your episodes. Obviously, all the episodes in there. Was there any that surprised you, like with the reaction? Like, was there any that you got like some really great feedback that you maybe thought that wasn't going to be, or somewhat like, was there anything that like really surprised you from any of the episodes that you've put out there?
Absolutely. So here's the thing. So this is episode 49. So obviously I've done 48 before this. They're kind of all my babies. They're all my kids. I like them all in different ways. Some of them I like more than others. I would obviously never really communicate out like what I like the most, because, you know, I appreciate the guests coming on and their time. And so I would never want to put anyone in a position where they're told, hey, Jeff said that on the 48th out of 48 episodes, you know, in terms of ranking. So that's just not really what I'm trying to do. What I'll say is in terms of like episodes that have pleasantly surprised me to the upside. So I had Jason back on in March. So Jason was one of my managers that I worked for years ago. And he was fantastic. On the episode, it was a great conversation. I was able to show a lot of gratitude because professionally he did help me out a lot. But B, I would say something that kind of hammered home to me that I already knew, but it definitely helped to see, was episodes where the guests are very strong on social media definitely help the amount of listeners that I get, right? Because for me, I mean, I obviously have like a certain listener audience. I have certain people who, let's say, listen every week, follow every week on social media. But I do have some guests who, you know, when they're on and then I say, hey, if you don't mind, you know, share this to your social media, it goes to a whole new audience, right? Which is part of the idea, right? Get it to new ears. If, you know, 2% of those new ears listen, now you've got new listeners, and repeat it. So that was one where, excuse me, you know, we recorded it, we posted it. He shared it on LinkedIn. He shared it in different places, whatever. Got a lot of people, even like professionally, a lot of people reaching out and saying like, hey, that was great. Thank you so much. Danny Gardner was the same way as well. Like Danny Gardner was great from a branding perspective, from an online perspective. He has his own website. He shared it out, and like, that's what happened. What I'll say is interesting also to that point was I have some episodes that do a lot better on video versus audio. I have some episodes that did really, really well on YouTube. And maybe not as well from an audio perspective on like Spotify and Apple. And I have some that do vice versa. And it's not even for the reasons you would think, right? It's not like, hey, this is a very visual episode, so this would do more. I think a lot of it goes back to what I said before, and the fact that like Jason has a YouTube presence. So he shared out the YouTube link, which got a lot of his people to go check it out. Versus others, like let's say a Megan Fernandez episode, like I think like her family and her friends are more probably on the audio aspect. She shares it over, Instagram, over Facebook, stuff like that. And that does really, really well as well. I mean, I've had a few episodes that, let's say, from a streaming perspective, were a little disappointing from a numbers perspective. Some of the guests, let's say didn't necessarily, I don't say cooperate, but weren't as helpful when it came to promoting it. But at the end of the day, like that's not on them, right? This is my show. Like they're a guest and it's not up to them to advertise my content. So, but at the same time, I've told all my guests, like, whatever we record, like you can use. So if anyone, let's say a professional wrestler, let's say it's somebody in various industries, whatever, I tell them, screenshot the video, clip it, use it however you want it, promote yourself. Like Matt Cardona does a fantastic job of it. So Matt Cardona, professional wrestler, he's on every podcast you could think of. Chris Van Vliet, Busted Open.
Which episode was he on again?
Matt Cardona, he's going to be on episode 69 in a couple of weeks. Just kidding. So what he ends up doing is like anywhere he's at, he clips it and he's just posting stuff all day. So not only is he getting the recognition for it, but like the actual show he was on gets out there as well. So, I think he does a fantastic job. It's all about promoting yourself. Like I promote myself. I try to promote my guests. Some of my guests do promote themselves and this show better than others. But like I said, at the end of the day, they didn't sign up to be, a marketer here. This is all on me.
Point noted, and as by my terrible attempt to do all the socials at the start, people can probably guess that I'm not a big social media guy. So I apologize for terribly promoting my episodes, and apologies, Jack. So I'll add that.
No worries. We're going to get a big ad in the middle of Times Square so everybody will see it. We'll get a QR code. It'll all be good to go.
Cool. So there's a couple of things I want to go to, because I think what's been great about this is just obviously we talked about the variety of guests you've had, how you've had really good different guests throughout the episodes, but also you've done your solo pods. And you've talked a lot about how those are like a challenge. Like I did a 30-second monologue coming in here for you, and that was, not going to lie, pretty stressful. It's hard talking to yourself. So I'd just love to hear a bit about how do you go about those solo pods? What have you enjoyed about them? What have you not enjoyed? Just love to hear about that format in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. So solo pods are ones that I kind of like, I want to say like extra produce. So what I'll generally do is like, I'll put a solo pod out either in the absence of having a guest, or if I haven't done a solo pod in a while, I'll just schedule a solo pod for myself. So what I'll do is, over a number of weeks, like as topics come to mind, I'll make a note. So like I said before, I use OneNote, I'll type it down and I'll put it. So looking at it right now. So we had a solo pod last week. So going into it, I took a bunch of notes. I said, experience at the wrestling show commentary, Universal Fan Fest, flying, Dexter event, college football 2026 video game. So, and I also had a couple other things there too that I didn't get onto it. So then what I'll do is once I start recording, I basically go like topic by topic and talk about it. I think those are the episodes that it's even more important for me to put notes down, because I don't have anybody to react to or respond to. So for the most part, it's me talking for 30 to 55 minutes straight. So I don't necessarily have, when we're talking, or I'm talking to Marcus, or I'm talking to John or whoever else like that, like we can go in different tangents based on what somebody says and kind of have a real conversation. Versus a solo pod, I'm, like I've said before, I'm talking to myself, right? So if I get lost in my own thought, or if I kind of go in a different direction, I don't remember where I was going, it gets very challenging to get myself back on track or to figure it out. Additionally, I want to kind of, keep it so that's kind of streamlined, and I don't want to talk for 3 hours. So I do need a couple of topics, put it in there, and just kind of go with it. A lot of times for me with the solo pod, the challenge is, like I said before, not having them to react to, and also figuring out when to end the episode as well. Because sometimes, I'm looking at the clock, 33 minutes, 35 minutes, 37 minutes. Like, what is the appropriate amount of time? Like, I try to keep the podcast, when possible, it's like 40 to 45 minutes, which I'll say the first maybe 20 episodes I did. The last 6 months or so, I've probably been a little guilty of going over in time. But I'd say that's largely because of just, I've gotten more comfortable, more experienced, and the guests have started sharing more stories. Like, oftentimes guests don't necessarily get fully comfortable telling stories until like 25 minutes in. Just being perfectly honest and showing you a little bit behind the curtain, I have an episode dropping in, I think about 2 weeks, with two guys named Robert and Tyler. Recorded it a couple of weeks ago. It's an interesting episode in the fact that I spent the first 23, 24 minutes just basically trying to figure them out, trying to see what the actual topic should be, or kind of see where it goes. It's around 25 minutes into it that it gets really interesting, I think, because I finally, figure out what we should be talking about. So it's one of those things where like it just takes time. And then once I started talking with them, like I didn't really want to stop it, but I figured I had to at some point. But again, once we started talking and we were comfortable, like these guys were just going a mile a minute, and they were having a lot of fun. But it took us, it was quite a journey to get there.
Yeah, great. So a little time for a little quiz. So a couple of questions, touching on where you were actually. Longest and shortest podcast. Can you remember what the longest one and the shortest one was?
Oh, of course. I mean, so the shortest one by far, and Marcus tells me about this all the time, was my PSA about voting back in November. I remember, I think the idea was I was on a soapbox of sorts, and I was like, I think it's important everybody votes. So I don't want people to waste time listening to the podcast when they can get outside and go and vote, whatever else like that. So my idea was just record a quick, like minute 45 PSA. Hey guys, it's important, vote or don't vote. But at the end of the day, that's your prerogative, it's your right as an American. When the episode dropped, not surprisingly, the episode didn't do great. I guess people probably saw the amount of time and was like, hey, there's probably not much content here. It's probably just an advertisement. Who cares? Of course, first thing in the morning, I got a text from Marcus who was like, hey, is the podcast broken? It's a very small file. Like, is this working how it's supposed to? I'm not really sure. And then he listened to it and he's like, oh, you're the worst, Jeff. Like, what are we doing here? Don't ever do something like this again. So that was number one. Number two was I did a bonus movie review of the movie Novocaine. I think it was back in like March or April, which it was basically a test. I was kind of like, hey, what if I put out a bonus episode? Let's see what it looks like. So it wasn't even like my normal Monday episode. Like I dropped the Monday episode and then I dropped the Novocaine bonus movie review on Wednesday. So that was that. In terms of the longest episode, and I think this is it, but keep me honest, was it Marcus's debut with you about card collecting?
Yeah, it was. Yes, correct.
It was a fun one.
Yeah, it was a great one. Yeah, and I'm glad you I forgot about the Novocaine extra because that's what we need you to do more of to get to that 8.5 podcast episodes a week. So that's the way to go. Awesome. Okay. Also, a massive thing I would want to say is just a thank you because this podcast has also given me the chance to hang out with you at some really fun events. So I want to just touch on the live event we did. Like, how cool was that? Like, how did you go about really doing a live podcast? Like, it's great doing it in this environment. You talked about like how you set it up here. Like, there's a lot that goes into just doing it in this controlled environment. How did you come up with the idea of doing a live event? How did you plan for it? And then how did you ultimately think it went?
Sure. So real quick, just to kind of touch on what you said before this. So this is a quote that I've dropped multiple times. I think I mentioned to you and Marcus, and I drop it in 2 weeks in my conversation with Robert and Tyler. And I love it. Like, it's a meme that I saw probably 6 months ago, but it sits with me all the time. That podcasts were invented as an excuse for straight dudes to go on a date together. Like, legitimately, like this has given me an opportunity to obviously meet new people. But at the same time, like, for example, Marcus, right? Marcus, I met on the Facebook group for Major Wrestling Figure Podcast. I think you and I hung out with him for maybe about 10 minutes back in the American Dream Mall back in November at a wrestling show. But, if you were to kind of like fair share out or look from a comparison perspective, 98% of my, eye-to-eye or face-to-face interactions with Marcus have been while recording on this podcast. So, that has been pretty great. So back to your question, though, in terms of the live podcast that we did back in January, and cheap plug, July 27th. So this will drop a week before. So that'll be this upcoming Sunday in the Mecca at Ridgefield Park, New Jersey. Daniel and myself will once again be at PWJ Live for PWJ2. Go check out pwjcards.com for more information. So with that said, how did I get involved in the first show back in January? So via social media, I don't know if it was Facebook or on Instagram, I saw there was going to be a show. So even before I thought about, hey, I should sponsor it or do something with it, legitimately, the first thing I did was I reached out to either you or John, and I was like, this show looks amazing. Nick Gage is going to be on it. Zeta Steel is going to be on it. Like, lots of names that could be fun from an indie wrestling perspective, but also a number of wrestlers that I did not have any pictures or autographs from. So I was like, this would be awesome. And then I started seeing Gilbert, shout out to Gilbert, who runs the show, was posting about sponsorships. So I messaged him. I was like, hey, I run a podcast. I've been doing it for 6 months at this point. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know what you're charging, but like, what would a sponsorship look like? And he goes, okay, here's some options, blah, 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 without giving prices. This is kind of what's going on. He was like, okay, so this is what you can do if you wanted to get a table as like a vendor or as a sponsor. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. I'd like to do that. So I sent him the money. We had a contract. He was great about it, whatever. And then I sent him a note, and I thought about it. I was like, okay, so if I have a table, like, I don't really have something to sell, right? Like for example, Dana and Sean were there for Mark That Collectibles. They're doing autograph signings. They were selling merchandise. But I was like, what am I going to do? Like, I have an attic full of wrestling stuff, but like, I'm not looking to have a garage sale at this wrestling show. Like, this is not what I want to do. Like, how do I make the most of this table? So I reached out to Dana. I was like, hey, so I'm sponsoring a match, and I get a table with that, but I don't really have use for the table. Do you guys need a table to use for your autographs or extra space? And Dana was like, I don't know, maybe we'll see. I was like, okay. But then after talking to him, I thought about it. I was like, I wonder if I could record a live podcast at this show. And this is one where I definitely overthought it and definitely had a lot of anxiety for multiple nights trying to figure out how it works. Because as you guys probably know, when I record the podcast at home, it's over Wi-Fi, it's in a very controlled setting, it's quiet and stuff like that. Additionally, like I use a Mac at home. Like I don't have a MacBook, I don't have a laptop. I'm trying to figure out like how would I legitimately record a podcast live? So I kind of tested it out. I took out my iPad, I went to Best Buy, I bought a couple of USB hubs, I bought some portable headset microphones, tested it out. I even did a quick podcast test with a friend of mine, Stephanie, who I also work with. Shout out to Stephanie if she's listening, probably not, but shout out anyway. And I was like, hey, could we just test something out real quick? I'm going to record something. I will not save it or post it anywhere. She's like, yeah, cool, whatever. So again, appreciate her trust in me there. Tested it out and it worked. So then from there, I reached out to Gilbert and I was like, okay, so here's my plan. I'd like to do this, that, and whatever. And I'd like to record a podcast before the show. He was like, absolutely. The only condition is you can't actually record the show for the podcast because it was streaming over highspots.tv and they have all sorts of, I guess, exclusive streaming rights. So day of the show came by. Daniel and I showed up at the show. I had this huge crate full of just all my technology. So we had iPads, we had microphones, we had all sorts of stuff. Like I got flyers. I even printed. This is when I first printed up the trading cards as kind of like a giveaway, so people can figure out the information for the show. So I get in there. I go, hey Gilbert, hey, how's it going? Meet him in person for the first time. I'm like, hey, is there Wi-Fi in this building? He's like, oh no, there's no Wi-Fi here. I'm like, oh shoot, like this is going to be a challenge because again, everything is obviously recorded to the cloud. So I'm looking at it. So I'm testing out the data in the building. It seems like it's good enough, but I'm hopeful that it's going to stay as it needs to. So we're walking around. We got there too early because there's still like a fencing tournament going on in the building. The Mecca in Ridgefield Park, New Jersey has everything from apparently salsa dancing to fencing to anything you could think of, right? So, okay, the fencing is over. They're setting up the ring. They're doing whatever. Quickly, Daniel and I set up the table. I talked to Gilbert, and he's like, hey, good to meet you again. Here's an all-access pass. Go downstairs. I'll see if I can find some guests for you. I was like, great. So it was just an amazing day over the course of like the 5 hours pre-show. Just basically, I had free reign to walk around, asking various wrestlers that they'd be guests on the show. Great conversation. It was a lot of fun. Definitely a lot of learnings that I'm going to apply when we record again next week at PWJ2. But it's really cool, and I'm really excited for the opportunity of what we can do, not just for this live show upcoming, but even the idea of like, hey, when I go to Disney World, like, can I record a podcast like from my hotel room? Or can I do it from Universal? Or just various on-location places. So definitely opens up the opportunities. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it was a ton of fun, and it worked out really well. Actually, the sound quality was great. You got some awesome guests. You got your one curse, but that's okay. We can live with that. So
I did.
Not bad for a year. Not for all the podcasts. That's not terrible.
Yeah. So. Shout out to Tarzan and Duran. Absolutely.
Yeah. Right. Got some quick fire questions for you. So first one is obviously no podcast compared to this one, but what's a podcast you like to listen to?
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, I do get a lot of a lot from the Major Wrestling Figure podcast. So Matt Cardona, Brian Myers, Mark Sterling, they do an amazing job. It's very interesting, very cool. There are some similarities between this show and that one. I've mentioned in the past, I've listened to the Daniel Tosh podcast, which is very similar to this, but slightly different style. Years ago, I listened to Colt Cabana's Art of Wrestling, another inspiration of mine. I'd say the only other podcast I really listen to regularly would be the Marked Out Collectibles podcast, which drops weekly. So shout out to Dana and Sean.
Nice, cool. Favorite piece of podcast merch you've created so far?
Great question. So what I'll say is this. As you've probably seen, I've created a few different ones. So obviously there's the hat that you're wearing right now. So thank you for wearing the hat. There is the t-shirt you're wearing, so the hat was the first piece of merch. The t-shirt you're wearing was the second piece because the t-shirts we made, I had 3 pieces made for the PWJ show because I figured we'd look more professional if we're wearing merch for the show that we're actually recording. I've created stickers, which are cool. Obviously the trading cards, but more recently, my favorite one are the various t-shirts that Allison can make for me. So it's definitely made it so it's a lot more efficient. It's a lot cheaper, a lot more customizable. Just all kidding aside, like those hats were not cheap. Trying to make 6 custom embroidered hats is not cheap. Even like 3 custom t-shirts were not cheap. But now that we have my daughter Allison, who's 15, making t-shirts, no, it's not a sweatshop. She's making at least minimum wage, if not more. And they're very customizable and easy. And if you do want to get a podcast t-shirt, definitely direct message me on Instagram at Everybody Has a Story Pod. It just made it very easy. We've probably sold, I would say, 24 shirts at this point. We can customize it. We have guest shirts. We have host shirts. We have just regular shirts. I'm creating some new shirts with the QR code for the show. So different variations of it. So I would say, as much as I've loved the evolution, the fact that now we can kind of do stuff on demand, this is where it's at. And I have some ideas for the future as well. So we'll see where it goes.
Awesome. And just remember, you do have to invest a little bit. It's a 17.6 billion industry, remember. So a little bit of investment up front.
Of course.
Pay off up front. If you could have anyone famous, dead or alive, on your podcast, who would it be?
Definitely alive.
So I have no words to that. I'm gonna that was good. Jeff, that was really funny. That was funny.
I hear you. Yeah. So, all kidding aside, or I guess some kidding aside, who would I like to interview of all time? I mean, I would say, just to be honest, I've mentioned like Colt Cabana, I've mentioned Daniel Tosh, Brian Myers, Mac Cardona, Mark Sterling. So I would say, as much fun as this podcast has been over the last year, I would like to know more about like their origins in podcasting, right? Like Colt Cabana, I look at as kind of the godfather of podcasting. He had a podcast long before most people even knew podcasts were a thing. Like I think I first found his podcast back in, I want to say like 2010, 11 or 12, something like that, which most people didn't really know what podcasts were at the time. So I'd love to know what gave him the idea, right? Like where did he figure it out? Like I went to other people, I went to Husfar and Billy. Like where did Colt go to when he wanted to figure out like, how do I do a podcast, or what is a podcast? I think that'd be really interesting.
I love that. Awesome. Okay, well, we're up at the 40+ minute mark, and I know that we're on a strict timeline because the last day Marcus and I were on, we went a little bit over. So just want to finish a couple of last questions, really, and this has been such a lot of fun. So obviously, what an amazing year. You've had great guests, you've had great subject matter, on location, solo pods, multi-part, and now you've had like a guest host, right? How do you, first of all, how do you beat having a guest host? But really just want to hear, and I'm sure your listeners want to hear, what's to come? What's on the vision for the podcast for the next year?
Gotcha. Great question. So first off, I would say maybe 2 guest hosts. Like maybe next time I get 2 people who can kind of like tag team and go back and forth, and they kind of bring me in.
Or someone that comes to mind straight away.
I mean, I'm sure we could probably figure out somebody. Maybe his name maybe rhymes with like Darkus Mandan or something. I don't know. We could figure it out. We'll see. Maybe 3 guest hosts or 7 guest hosts. I mean, we'll figure it out at some point. In terms of what's to come. So as mentioned, coming up, we do have PWJ2. So I'm really excited to see what we get. I have some ideas of who I want to talk to. It's going to be at the show, but obviously we'll see who ends up, making themselves available for conversation, who I can talk to. I alluded to a conversation with 2 guys, Robert and Tyler. It was, again, a very interesting conversation. We'll see how that goes. In terms of other things coming up. So things that I've thought about is, again, a few weeks ago, I was at the Weird Al Yankovic concert, made some inroads with some people there. Would love to talk to at least one of them about like traveling the country with Weird Al Yankovic to understand like what is it that Weird Al brings out of them, why do they like it so much, what kind of camaraderie did they have with like other people, other, let's say, groupies of sorts that follow Weird Al Yankovic around, right? Like the shows aren't that different, but I'm sure it's about the experience, about what they see and stuff like that. I've talked to a few people recently about other ideas for being guests. One guy that I know is a twin. So I'm trying to get him and his twin brother both on to understand like what is it like growing up as a twin. I mean, I have a younger sister. Obviously, I experienced life with a sibling in one way. But when you have somebody who's, 10 minutes older or younger than you, and somebody who you've always been in the same grade with, you've always lived with, all of a sudden at some point in life when you guys kind of split up and live in different towns or different states, like, is that weird when your entire life was spent, basically probably being confused for each other? So very excited to see, if I can get that one together and how it goes. Outside of that, like I said before, I'm very open to other guests, looking for different topics, trying to learn whatever I can. I'm sure we'll have plenty of solo pods coming up, probably have another best of the year coming up at the end of the year. But, I try to have fun. I try to put myself in the listeners' seats, or I guess headphones or whatever it would be, and see like if I were out there, what would be interesting to me? Not that I'm necessarily talking to an audience of one, but trying to figure out like, hey, besides cracking myself up, what would crack somebody else up sometimes?
Awesome. Love it. And I am going to let you close, seeing it as your own podcast, but just thank you for letting me host. It's been an honor, and just a great job on a year anniversary. If anyone wants a spin-off, I'm happy to host, but as my socials aren't here, just let Jeff know. I'm happy to do regular spin-offs. But just from all the guests that have been on, thank you for creating a great environment and just for getting such great guests on. I know a lot of work goes into it. And again, congrats on outlasting the majority of podcasts, and I look forward to next year and beyond. So it's a great work, and congrats again on all the success, and keep it coming.
Thanks, I appreciate it. So this has been Everybody's a Story with Daniel Ireland. I am not your host, but I am Jeff Seltzer this week. So first off, again, shout out to Paula Ireland if she's out there listening. Hey, how's it going, Paula? Once again, though, I want to close out the show. Again, thank everybody for listening, coming on this journey with me. There's a lot more to come. Definitely, if you want to be a part of this adventure, reach out. Let me see how we can partner, see what we can do. Reminder that we are on Instagram at Everybody Has a Story Pod. Once again, we're still on TikTok at Everybody Has a Story Pod. My personal Instagram is at Seltzer77. The show is on YouTube at Everybody Has a Story Pod. You can email the show directly at everybodyhasastorypod@gmail.com. For all things Jeff Seltzer, you can reach me out over at jeffseltzer.com. New website for the show that I'm thinking probably on a weekly basis I'll rotate where it points, or kind of like what it is. Maybe video of the week, or I don't know what. We'll figure it out. You can find that at everybodyhasastorypod.com. Once again, we are on all podcast platforms, video on YouTube and Spotify, audio on Apple, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and everywhere else you can find a podcast. With that said, this has been Jeff Seltzer and Daniel Ireland. Thank you so much for joining, as always. A lot more to come. Definitely reach out via the socials, or if you see me in the hall, give me a high five or a fist bump. Outside of that, take care, brush your hair, and we'll talk soon.
Everybody has a story with Jeff Seltzer. Everybody has a story with Jeff Seltzer.